The photographs from Germany's industrial heartland in late 2025 did not come with fury or dramatic gestures. Factory gates closing at Volkswagen plants, for sale signs outside supplier facilities in Bavaria, cargo containers sitting idle at Bremen port. What made these scenes consequential was not their visual drama, but their mathematical finality. While Germany's industrial production contracted for the fourth consecutive year, Poland's economy expanded 3.2% in 2025. While German manufacturers announced 35,000 job cuts at Volkswagen alone, Poland maintained unemployment near 3%, one of the tightest labour markets in Europe. This is not a temporary divergence. This is structural realignment. And if the industrial geography of Europe can flip this decisively in less than a decade, what does that tell us about the stability of hierarchies we assumed were permanent? For 70 years, the economic order of Europe followed a clear gradient. Germany manufactured, Eastern Europe assembled, capital flowed west to east for cheap labour. Profits flowed east to west as dividends. This was not merely economic arrangement, it was geopolitical architecture. Germany became Europe's largest economy by building what economists called the extended workbench model, high-value engineering in Munich and Stuttgart, low-cost production in Warsaw and Bucharest. By 2019, German companies had invested more in Poland than any other foreign source. The model worked as long as three conditions held: cheap Russian energy, stable Chinese demand, and technological advantage in internal combustion engines. By 2025, all three had collapsed. Germany's industrial electricity prices now stand multiple times higher than those in the United States or China. Automotive production fell from 5.6 million units in 2017 to below 4 million in 2024. Mercedes-Benz profits dropped 56% in the first half of 2025. Porsche's operating profit plunged 91%. These are not recessionary figures. These are structural elimination figures. Meanwhile, Poland posted GDP growth projections of 3.5% for 2026, fueled not by low wages. Polish wages have risen substantially, but by EU fund absorption, infrastructure investment, and foreign enterprises treating Poland not as a workbench, but as a production platform. The rupture was not announced in a single event. It accumulated across 1,000 quiet decisions. A supplier relocating from Saxony to Silesia, a logistics hub choosing Rzeszów over Hamburg, a data center picking Krakow over Frankfurt. By the time analysts recognized the pattern, the reversal was already irreversible. And here's the thing: energy costs alone explain much of the divergence, but not in the way most assume. A price wall has emerged across European electricity markets. On the western side, France, Spain, Germany, prices range between 180 and 200 euros per megawatt hour. On the eastern side, Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, prices range between 87 and 102 euros per megawatt hour. You would expect Germany, with its renewable capacity and industrial scale, to sit on the cheaper side of that wall. It does not. German industrial electricity prices remain among the highest in Europe, driven not merely by withdrawal from Russian gas but by structural grid bottlenecks. Most renewable capacity sits in northern and eastern Germany. Most heavy industry sits in the west and south. The transmission infrastructure to connect them does not exist at necessary scale. Grid expansion has progressed slowly. Approval procedures prove complex. Infrastructure projects face local opposition and court challenges. The result? System operators must intervene frequently to maintain stability, curtailing wind farms and redispatching power plants at costs reflected in network charges. The government announced subsidies enabling energy-intensive companies to cap electricity at approximately 0.05 euros per kilowatt-hour starting in 2026, financed through 3.1 billion euros in temporary support. But this is triage, not cure. The structural mismatch between renewable generation geography and industrial demand geography persists. Poland faces different energy challenges, higher baseline prices in some regions, continued coal dependence. But crucially, Poland is not attempting simultaneous nuclear phase-out, coal phase-out, and grid transformation while maintaining globally competitive heavy industry. As one German industrialist put it off the record, "We can build the greenest grid in Europe, but if it costs 3 times what American factories pay, we will not have factories left to power." Corporate taxation represents another structural wedge. Poland's corporate income tax, 19%. Germany's statutory rate, 30%. That 11 percentage point difference, compounded annually across a manufacturing operation's lifespan, translates into dramatically different return on investment calculations. Add Germany's employer social security contributions, among Europe's highest and heavy regulatory compliance costs, and the total burden on German enterprises becomes substantially higher than Central European competitors. The cost of excessive regulation in the European Union is estimated at up to €1 trillion per year, between 3.7 and 12.3% of GDP. The EU publishes approximately 1,200 regulations, 80 directives, and 700 decisions annually. 61% of EU companies cite regulatory burden as an obstacle to investment. Germany, as Europe's largest economy and most bureaucratically rigorous state, bears disproportionate regulatory weight. Environmental compliance, labour law complexity, permitting duration, all create friction costs that compound over time. Poland, while not immune to regulatory challenges, has demonstrated greater flexibility. Permitting for industrial projects proceeds faster. Labour law allows greater employer discretion. What's quite funny is that reaction among German policymakers remains divided. Some acknowledge the competitiveness crisis and call for regulatory simplification. Others insist that lowering standards would betray European values. But the market does not negotiate values. The market allocates capital to jurisdictions where after regulation returns prove highest. By December 2024, Germany's business climate index fell to 84.7 points, a near 4-year low. Among manufacturers, only 15.7% expected improvement, while 31.8% anticipated further decline. Meanwhile, multinational enterprises redirected investment eastward. Poland became attractive not as a cheap production location, but as a strategic node within integrated European supply chains, where companies combine proximity to Western markets with lower operating costs. The automotive sector provides the clearest window into Germany's competitive collapse. Volkswagen agreed to cut at least 35,000 jobs at its core brand, with 15,000 already eliminated by late December 2025. Porsche announced nearly 6,000 job cuts. Suppliers and related industries announced layoffs exceeding 10,000 monthly positions. This is not cyclical adjustment. This is capacity elimination. Germany was substantially late transitioning to electromobility. Manufacturers relied excessively on internal combustion engine superiority while failing to take the electric vehicle revolution, led by Tesla and Chinese producers, with sufficient seriousness. When the German government removed EV incentives at the end of 2023, domestic demand collapsed. Insufficient charging infrastructure, high prices, and withdrawal of state support severely undermined consumer confidence. Then came the energy shock. Closure of nuclear plants drove industrial electricity costs to multiples of US or Chinese levels. Chinese manufacturers emerged as the primary threat. BYD overtook Tesla in 2024 to become the world's largest electric car maker. German sales of BYD vehicles rose over 700% to more than 23,000 cars, despite EU tariffs of up to 35.3%. And here's the strategic trap. German manufacturers like Mercedes and Volkswagen sell approximately 30% of their automobiles in China. They face Chinese competition in their home market, while depending on Chinese consumers for profitability. Several major manufacturers accelerated plans to relocate production to Eastern Europe or Asia. Some initiated facility closures in 2025. The crisis reveals both economic and social dimensions. Rising unemployment fuels support for far-right parties. The weakening of Germany's historically industry-based welfare model threatens more profound social inequalities in the long run. Poland's growth trajectory reflects not merely German decline but genuine Polish competitive strengths. The country maintains corporate tax rates 11 points below Germany. It absorbed EU recovery and resilience facility funds more effectively than many Western counterparts, with approximately €9.4 billion reaching final beneficiaries by year-end 2025 and more than €18.8 billion projected for 2026 and early 2027. Beyond RRF funds, Poland has spent only around 10% of the €76 billion granted under cohesion funds for 2021 to 2027. This represents enormous untapped investment potential, supporting sustained growth through 2027 and into 2028. The Polish labour market maintains exceptional tightness. Unemployment, projected to remain around 3% through the forecast period, reflects not weakness but productive capacity operating at full employment. Poland's strategic positioning as a nearshoring destination strengthened appeal to foreign investors seeking to diversify production away from Asia. However, researchers warn that outlook for the coming decade presents challenges after 2 decades of exceptional growth. Poland faces erosion of cost advantages through rising energy and labour costs. The country is only beginning to build locational advantages based on innovation and R&D, remaining predominantly a consumer rather than producer of advanced technologies. Foreign direct investment in Central and Eastern Europe fell by around 25% compared to 2023. Poland specifically experienced a 48% collapse in FDI inflows. German and Austrian companies, traditionally among the largest investors, substantially reduced commitments amid their own structural crises. Poland stands at an inflection point. The country can either leverage current momentum to build endogenous innovation capacity and technological champions, or risk stalling convergence as cost advantages erode without replacement by knowledge-based competitiveness. Both Poland and Germany face demographic constraints, though manifesting differently. Poland recorded the EU's largest population decline for the second consecutive year, falling by over 123,000 between January 2024 and January 2025. Poland's fertility rate fell to a record low of 1.099, among the lowest worldwide. Government statistical agencies estimate Poland's population could fall to as low as 26.7 million by 2060, representing a 27% reduction from current levels. The Social Insurance Institution estimated Poland would need to attract almost 2 million immigrant workers over the next decade to maintain current ratios of working-age population to retirees. Germany faces different dynamics. Overall population remains more stable, but workforce composition shifts dramatically toward older ages. The share of population aged 80 and over increased from 3.8% in 2004 to 6.1% in 2024. Germany attracts substantial immigration, 1.27 million immigrants in 2023, yet these inflows have not prevented erosion of domestic industrial employment. What's quite uncertain at this time is whether Poland can attract and retain the skilled immigration necessary to offset population decline, or whether demographic headwinds will eventually constrain growth regardless of policy competence. The conflict in Ukraine has created both challenges and opportunities for Poland's economy, with reconstruction needs potentially catalyzing substantial Polish growth. Prime Minister Donald Tusk presented a model of Poland's involvement in Ukraine's reconstruction built around 3 pillars: transport, trade, and investment. Poland plans to invest in road, rail, and communications infrastructure. 90% of military equipment bound for Ukraine currently transports via Polish routes, corridors that will serve reconstruction supply chains in coming years. Poland plays a major role in trade with Ukraine, with 30% of all EU exports to Ukraine originating from Poland. If Ukraine stabilizes and begins reconstruction at scale, Poland stands positioned as the primary logistics gateway and construction partner. That could sustain Polish growth even as other drivers moderate. Beyond Germany and Poland's trajectories, European industrial production more broadly reveals ongoing structural challenges. The EU's value of sold production at constant prices declined for the second consecutive year in 2024, falling 2% compared to 2023. In nominal terms, production declined from €5.975 trillion in 2023 to €5.86 trillion in 2024. Within this decline, specific manufacturing activities showed divergent performance. Pharmaceutical manufacturing recorded the highest increase, 12.7% annually. Food, beverages, and tobacco increased 1.8%. Chemicals increased 1.5%. By contrast, electrical equipment manufacturing declined 8.6%. Motor vehicles and transport equipment fell 6.4%. Machinery and equipment declined 4.7%. These sectoral trends reveal patterns where energy-intensive and traditional manufacturing face structural headwinds, while pharmaceuticals and food production maintain resilience. Central and Eastern Europe has proven more resilient to global trade disruptions than many expected. This resilience reflects more diversified industrial bases compared to Germany's heavy automotive dependence, lower exposure to Chinese competition, and strategic positioning as nearshoring destinations. Analysis examining the 20 years following Eastern enlargement shows Central and Eastern European countries developed at rates almost twice as fast as the old Union EU15. Poland within this group developed fastest, with average growth reaching 3.8% annually compared to 1.6% for EU15. But researchers warn that the outlook for the coming decade presents challenges. In the cautionary scenario, convergence would stall, and the gap between post-socialist economies and EU15 would widen again. The optimistic scenario envisions that by 2035, Poland and the rest of CE11 could reach parity with EU15 in GDP per capita. Which scenario materializes depends substantially on each country's ability to implement institutional reforms and develop indigenous innovation capacity. What the economic flip between Poland and Germany ultimately signals is not temporary cyclical adjustment, but structural transformation of Europe's industrial geography. Germany's continued industrial decline, record insolvencies, and accelerating job losses represent not merely recession, but fundamental change. Energy costs elevated multiples above global competitors, combined with regulatory complexity, high labour costs, and lost technological advantage in key sectors, create difficult environments for German industrial recovery. Major manufacturers have initiated relocation decisions based on structural rather than cyclical considerations, suggesting recovery to pre-crisis production levels may not occur in coming decades. Poland's robust growth trajectory reflects successful integration into European supply chains, strategic EU funding absorption, competitive taxation, and positioning as nearshoring destination. However, Poland faces emerging challenges, rising costs eroding previous advantages, limited indigenous innovation capacity, and dependence on EU funding expiring in 2026. For Europe broadly, the divergence indicates that the extended workbench growth model dependent on foreign direct investment in low-wage manufacturing may be becoming obsolete. Countries maintaining prosperity must transition toward higher value-added activities based on innovation, education, and institutional quality. Germany, despite current difficulties, retains substantial technological capacity and human capital enabling recovery if structural reforms addressing energy costs, regulatory burden, and fiscal sustainability prove successful. The next decade will determine whether Europe maintains global economic relevance or experiences gradual marginalization as competition from Asia and North America intensifies. Economic hierarchies assumed permanent can reverse with remarkable speed when structural foundations erode. The question is not whether Poland replaces Germany. The question is whether either can compete in a world where energy, innovation, and regulatory efficiency increasingly determine industrial location, and whether European policymakers recognize that reality before the industrial map is redrawn entirely. Thank you for joining me. Like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for your support, and I look forward to seeing you here tomorrow. Bye for now.